We do no harm. That's rule number 1 of Mappa Mundi. If you're playing the game, you're exploring, you're learning, you're chronicling what you see, and that's at the very heart of the experience. But notice I didn't say the word fighting there. Yeah, there's no fighting in this game, and that is an inspired piece of design in my view. My name is Rich, this is Renegade Rolls, and I've played and run a lot of tabletop role-playing games, from the big monster which is Dungeons & Dragons, to some tiny little beasties which hardly anyone's heard of, and I can safely say Mappa Mundi is something special. This review isn't paid or sponsored. I came across the Kickstarter, loved the concept, and then pestered the creators for a press kit. I've since backed it for oh so many reasons, which I get to share with you now. Mappa Mundi is created by a 3-person team based in Manchester in England. They call themselves 3 Sail Studios. Between them, they've made a game system that I find fascinating. Let's have a quick 30 seconds rule summary. The aim of Mappa Mundi is to learn about the wilds of a post-apocalyptic world and the behaviours of its monsters. The player characters, aka chroniclers, are members of the Mappa Mundi Institute and have all taken a vow to do no harm. Players roll dice depending on skill level. You start with d4s and d6s, but you can upgrade as you go. Meets it, beats it. This is a non-combat system with 4 character stats: traversal, observation, deduction, and exploration. The game uses phases to split up the story. The research phase is all about gathering clues. Journey phase is telling the story of the places you go, revealing cards. The encounter phase is finally coming face to face with the monster. You want to learn everything you can about these epic creatures. It's all very well me telling you about these monsters, but how about I show you instead? Holy moly, I'm impressed with this. Okay, fine. That last one's me and my cuddly little haggis, but I've made a creature sheet for it, and you can bring it into your own games if you like. There's a link in the description below. Let's take a look at what we can expect in a session of Mappa Mundi. We begin with character creation, which around my table took about 20 minutes per character. It was pretty simple and intuitive with no maths to be done. My players in the sessions that I ran had some questions about the different skills and abilities, but we got through those pretty quick. We played through the Root and Branch adventure module, which took us about 3 hours in total, including character creation. The rest of this video will contain spoilers for that adventure. The game begins with the research phase, where our chroniclers are out in the world asking questions of people, trying to learn anything they can about a mysterious monster somewhere in the forest. This is prime roleplay opportunity. Players can chat to each other, they can chat to NPCs, and they can ask about the world. But what's interesting is the GM is told to let the players paint the scene with them, to add details to characters or locations. This is such a good way of making the story feel like it belongs to everyone around the table. I am a big fan of games which proactively encourage roleplay and world building together. This group painting of the scene together gets called shaping in Mappa Mundi. If I'm being pedantic, which I like to be sometimes, I would say that there's a bit too much terminology here, especially for new folks to take in a one-shot. If this becomes one of my core systems I'm playing every week, it won't be a problem. But when you're onboarding people, when you're trying to get them comfortable in a one-shot or a first time trying something, limiting the terminology and the jargon, well, that can only be a good thing. Phase 2 of the game is the journey. This is where our chroniclers set out into the wilds. They explored the forest, they explored a lake, they explored and didn't get too lost in the fog. Each of the journey cards has encounters on it and opportunities to build the world together. If the card is right-wise, it tends to yield an exploring or roleplay encounter. If the card's inverted, it's more likely to be combat, or it might cost the group some resources. The cards are placed on the table by the GM almost like a tarot deck, and there's something about the slow reveal of the steps of the journey that gives the game a leisurely pace compared to many others. When I was running this, I didn't feel rushed in the slightest, and it was a new and lovely feeling. An unexpected bonus for me was seeing just how much I have in common with the creators of this game. We seem to be very much on the same page in terms of game design, but also in outlook on life. There's a paragraph in the introduction to the book which makes me so happy to read, as it fits with my ethos on life beautifully. Mappa Mundi is a game with messages and beliefs. The world around you is a living, thinking, feeling thing. That non-human persons are beings with agency and rich inner lives, deserving of respect and understanding. That human creatures are wondrous and beautiful, with each contributing different ways and modes of understanding their place in the world. That heroism, courage and bravery are defined by normal people choosing to act in the interests of everyone rather than solely in their own interest. That taking part in the world is the only way to save it. If all this is sounding a bit too chill, a bit pedestrian for you, well, Mappa Mundi contains my favourite ever victory condition I've ever seen, and this is the big spoiler. At the end of the game, if things go well, you get to see giant snail intercourse. Yep. And that is at the end of the encounter phase. This final phase, the encounter phase, is the summation of everything that you've done so far. The difficulty of the encounter will depend on how well you've done in previous sections, but it's still possible to have a completely successful outcome, even if things have gone terribly so far. The way that encounters work is something I've not seen before. The monster has a number of threads, which can kind of symbolise hit points. These can be either intact, frayed, or severed. The mechanical aim of these encounters are to end with more intact threads than severed ones. To do this, your player characters are trying to learn all of the behaviours of the creature. These can be details on how it looks, how it sounds, how it acts in certain situations, how it interacts with others. And it was that interaction with others which, you might have guessed, led to that incredible moment of our chroniclers standing, looking into a cave, as one snail entwined itself around another. It was a really beautiful moment, and I think properly surprised some of my players. Mappa Mundi is a beautiful game, all about the beauty of discovery, and at its core, it's about building, fleshing out a world with your friends. This gives it a very different tempo to so many other games, and it took me a while to figure out exactly why everything felt so relaxed. It's not that there's no failure, that's always possible. It's because it's not the destination, but the journey, which is the core of the happiness, the core of the experience you get with Mappa Mundi. When we played, it felt good, actually, for the players to come away from the adventure without a perfect understanding of the monster. And I think a reason for this is the difference in expectations. If you're playing a classic TTRPG, you're an adventurer. The action that you're doing is defeating something. If you're playing something like Call of Cthulhu, where you're an investigator, the action you're doing is solving. Both of those have very clear endpoints. You know when you've achieved the thing. In Mappa Mundi, your role is to be a researcher, the chronicler. That is learning, and learning doesn't have an endpoint. This makes every discovery the characters make along the way feel special, that they're learning more and more each time, and that potentially there's no limit to what they could find out. Having said all that, I do still have a couple of minor gripes, some things that weren't quite as they could have been. Those behaviours of the creatures and monsters, and how the characters should go about learning them, well, that wasn't completely clear in the adventure, but I understand from the creators that that's getting a complete rewrite for the final edition. If you're looking for an absolute takedown, if you're expecting an aha, that game's not quite as good as we thought, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Mappa Mundi is a real breath of fresh air. The mechanics are simple, but the stories that you can tell have the potential to stay with you and your players for a lifetime. The Kickstarter runs until the 4th of March, and the finished product is expected by summer 2025. In the meantime, I've got 10,000 giant baby snails to find. If that's all the wholesomeness you feel you can take just now, if you're feeling like Skeletor going, "I don't like to feel good, I like to feel evil," then I've got lots of other videos for you. There's one here where you can be a super cool vampire, or one here where you can play as a cursed captain of Cthulhu. I'll see you in one of those, but to play us out, we've got even more beautiful art. I'll see you soon.